My name is Linda. I'm 55 years old, and a year ago, I lost everything I thought defined my life. For 28 years, I was a wife. Every morning, I woke up at 6, made breakfast, packed lunches, and kissed my husband goodbye before he left for work. I thought that routine would last forever. But one evening, he sat across from me at the dinner table and said something I never expected. "I'm not happy anymore." Just like that, my world cracked. At first, I thought it was a joke. Then I thought it was a phase. But within 3 months, he had moved out, and I was alone in a house that suddenly felt too big, too quiet, too empty. My kids were already grown. They had their own lives, their own families. They called me, of course, but it wasn't the same. The silence at night was the hardest. I remember sitting on the couch, staring at old photos, wondering where it all went wrong. I kept asking myself, was I not enough? For weeks, I barely left the house. I stopped caring about how I looked. I stopped answering calls. I even stopped cooking, something I used to love. One day, I looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. That's when something inside me whispered, "Linda, you're still here." That moment changed everything. The next morning, I did something small, but powerful. I went for a walk. Just 10 minutes. I didn't feel motivated. I didn't feel strong. But I walked anyway. The fresh air, the sound of birds, the feeling of moving forward, even slowly, it woke something up inside me. So I did it again the next day. And the next. Slowly, I started rebuilding my life. I joined a local book club. At first, I sat quietly in the corner listening. But over time, I began to speak, to laugh, to connect again. Then one of the women there said something that stuck with me. "Why don't you try something new?" Something new? At 55? It sounded scary, but also exciting. So I signed up for a painting class. I had never painted before. My first piece was terrible. Honestly, it looked like a child made it. But for the first time in months, I smiled. Not because I was good at it, but because I felt alive. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. I started waking up with a purpose again. I changed my hair, bought clothes that made me feel confident. I even started a small online page where I shared my paintings and my story. And something beautiful happened. People started connecting with me. Women my age, going through the same pain, the same loneliness, telling me, "You give me hope." I realized I wasn't alone. And neither were they. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset, I thought about the life I lost. And for the first time, I didn't feel sadness. I felt gratitude. Because losing that life helped me find myself. Today, I'm not just someone's ex-wife. I'm Linda, a woman who started over at 55. A woman who learned that it's never too late to grow, to heal, to begin again. So if you're listening to me right now, and you feel like your life is falling apart, let me tell you something from my heart. Sometimes, things fall apart, so better things can come together. And no matter your age, your story isn't over yet. Trust me, it's just beginning. My name is Margaret. I'm 56 years old. And if you asked me a year ago what my biggest fear was, I would have said losing my children. But life has a strange way of teaching you lessons you never asked for. I didn't lose my children physically. I lost them emotionally. I raised 2 kids, a son and a daughter. I gave them everything I had. Late nights, early mornings, sacrificing my dreams so they could chase theirs. When their father passed away 12 years ago, I became both mother and father. I was strong for them. I never let them see me break, even when I was falling apart inside. They grew up, became successful, moved to different cities. And I was proud. So proud. At first, they used to call me every day. "Mom, did you eat? Mom, how are you feeling?" But slowly, those calls became shorter. Then less frequent. Then they stopped coming at all. I told myself they're busy. That's life. But deep down it hurt. Days would go by, without a single message. I would sit by the window in the evening, holding my phone, hoping it would ring. Sometimes, I even dialed their numbers and then hung up before they answered. I didn't want to feel like a burden. On my 56th birthday, I woke up early. I cleaned the house. I cooked my favorite meal. I even baked a small cake for myself. I thought maybe this year they'll surprise me. Hours passed. Morning turned into afternoon, afternoon into night. No calls. No messages. Nothing. I sat at the dining table, staring at the cake, and for the first time in years, I cried like a child. I kept asking myself, did I do something wrong? That night, something inside me broke. But something else quietly started to rebuild. The next morning, I made a decision. If my children had their own lives, then maybe it was time I found mine again. I started small. I joined a community center nearby. At first, I felt out of place. Everyone seemed to have their own groups, their own friends. But one lady smiled at me. "First time here?" she asked. I nodded. "Don't worry, it gets easier," she said. And she was right. I started going every day. I met people who didn't know my past, who didn't see me as just someone's mother. They saw me as me. Margaret. I started helping out at the center, organizing events, serving tea, talking to people who were just as lonely as I once was. And slowly, that emptiness inside me began to fade. One day, a young woman came up to me. She looked tired, stressed. She said, "You remind me of my mom. I haven't called her in weeks." I smiled gently and said, "You should call her today." That evening, something unexpected happened. My phone rang. It was my daughter. Her voice was shaky. "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know why I've been so distant." Before I could respond, my son called too. For the first time in months, we talked. Not for a minute. Not for 5 minutes. 4 hours. They told me about their struggles, their stress, their lives. And I realized something important. They didn't forget me because they didn't love me. They got lost in their own battles, just like I once did. A week later, they came to visit me. We sat together, laughed, shared stories. But this time, something was different. I wasn't waiting for them to complete my life. I already felt whole. Now, I still love my children with all my heart. But I've also learned to love myself, to build my own happiness, to not depend on anyone for my peace. So if you're listening to me right now, and you feel forgotten, alone, invisible, let me tell you this. Sometimes people don't realize your value until you start valuing yourself. And when you do, everything changes. Trust me, you're not forgotten. You're just waiting to be rediscovered.